Hey everyone. Um, so, what happened with last week's vlog is I recorded it, and this time it was user error. In the Marine Corps, I was a aircraft mechanic, and in the maintenance community, there was a saying that it was a problem with the flight suit insert or the seat to throttle control lever, aka the pilot, human error. Well, that was me. Yesterday I meant to record it again, but due to life happening, as it always does, it just didn't happen. So, I apologize about that. I am 98% sure that it's recording this time, but I'll check before I leave. So, today is the 22nd of March, 2020. We are right in the middle of the COVID-19 panic, and things have gotten stupid. COVID-19 is one of those interesting scenarios where it is actually a serious problem. I mean, it's not just hype. Last time I checked, which was a while ago, we're looking at a 2% death rate, and mostly affecting people who have compromised immune system, compromised respiratory systems, etc., etc., etc. Due to past exposure and current exposure to different chemicals and things like that, I kind of consider myself in that category as far as my lungs have been damaged and filled with things they shouldn't have been filled with, and are probably getting filled with things they shouldn't be filled with now. But what's interesting is this is a serious problem. 2% is not, it sounds low statistically, but overall, chances are we're all going to know someone who caught it, and a good chunk of us are probably going to know someone who died from it, provided that this continues on the way it is. Being as we're heading into spring, my prediction is that it'll peter out, but once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a pandemicist or whatever they call them. So take what I think with a hefty grain of salt when it comes to whether or not it's going to peter out or not. But what's interesting is, even with as serious as it is, the problem has been made infinitely worse by the panic caused by it. I think more harm was going to come from the panic than actually comes from the disease. Right now we have entire communities, entire states here in the United States, and I'm sure this is happening elsewhere in the world. We're all under supposed quarantine. In California, my understanding is that they are on martial law lockdown, which, my personal opinion, is a massive overreaction. I go to the store just to buy simple sundries, stuff I would normally need to buy anyway. And so, for instance, I went to Costco. They're taking this serious. They had a line. They had someone out there talking about social distancing, and so they are slowing down traffic into it. They have all of their, or almost all of their cash registers open just so they can spread people out more. They actually have another employee out there. Only job is to sanitize the carts so you can just grab it and go. Which, considering how things are going, actually allowed them to implement these procedures and not terribly affect getting into it too much. So kudos to Costco. However, as you go through Costco, toilet paper is gone. Now, this is a respiratory illness. And yes, we are in a quarantine where, we don't know how severe the quarantine will get. But this has been going on for a while. I can't remember exactly when it came out. I don't have those figures to hand, as this is an off-the-cuff recording. But I believe it's been at least a month. but because people went out and they hoarded toilet paper, they hoarded water, they hoarded everything else, panic bought. There are people who probably will not run out of toilet paper for years, literally. Most people will be able to make it 6 to 9 months without running out of toilet paper if they're the ones who went out and panic bought it. But it's created a problem. You can't find toilet paper on any of the shelves. And as soon as they stock up, everyone goes back into panic mindset of, it's finally here, I need to get it. I need to get as much as I can. And they're actually having to impose limits, My wife uses water that needs to be a lot cleaner than our tap water in her CPAP machine. So, having water for her CPAP machine is actually very important for her. But, we keep some water on hand, and then we go to try and restock, and all of a sudden, water is wiped out. The taps are working, but water is wiped out. Places that have them have strict limits on it. At Costco, when I went, it was 1 case of water per customer limit, and no toilet paper on the shelves whatsoever. Most of the food had limits on it. Paper towels had limits on it. Fortunately, like I said, for the most part, I'm just trying to buy sundries and stuff, so the limits didn't terribly affect me. I wasn't out there to try and hoard stuff. But it is, one of those things that's going to cause problems now and in the future. Because, now you have all those people who are now running low on toilet paper, can't find toilet paper because they didn't panic buy. And now they are suffering the consequences of that, of not being able to find toilet paper, which, yes, we've survived centuries, millennia, however you want to count time, without without having toilet paper. It is a relatively modern invention in the course of human history. It is something that we've come to expect and rely on. And it's useful for doing more than its original purpose. You can blow your nose on it. It's soft enough. You can wipe things off with it. Children's faces and stuff like that without abrasing them. And so what's going to happen if I'm right? This dies down. But let's say it comes back in the fall or something else pops up. What's going to happen to that hoarder mentality? Because now you have all of these people who are struggling to find toilet paper. When we come back into plenty, most of them aren't going to stock up sufficiently. Or they're just going to they're going to stock up initially, right at the end of this, once the panic buying starts to die down. And then they're just going to use through it, and they're going to be, once again, at a subsistence. But the next time it happens, the panic buying on toilet paper, on water, on things like that is just going to be so much worse. Because they've learned that if they don't panic buy, they might not be able to get it in the future. So going back to biblical stories, 7 good years to prepare for 7 years of bad years. When times are good, don't be stupid. Work within your budget and your facilities. I couldn't stock 30 cases of toilet paper if I wanted to in my particular living condition. But you know what? If you have the money and you have a little extra time, when times are good, put a little aside. I'll go ahead and leave that rant there. Honestly, right now I'm so annoyed and disgusted and blown away by this that I could probably go on for a very long time. I'll save you that. So, as far as me and my goals, I got to the forge yesterday. Though it wasn't the forge, it was actually for cleanup so we can open up. when we are scheduled to open. So far, that has not been moved or changed, though they did cancel a few events due to State Department requirements, etc. But we were working on building a brick wall, and one of the things that I have definitely learned, I am a blacksmith, not a mason. And Matt is a blacksmith, not a mason. And once we have this done, it will be serviceable. But anyone who comes to look at it who is a mason is probably going to cringe. But that, and when Matt mixed up the mortar, he mixed it a little too wet, so we could only get one run in before we had to stop to let it dry. So I've actually been working more on world building and things like that than actually putting words on page, which I do need to get back to putting words on page. There's no doubt about it. Gone a little too long just figuring out how things were going to work. And that's one of those things that anyone who likes to write in alternate realities, alternate worlds, fantasy, sci-fi, etc., it's a very common hazard to get so far into world building that you never actually write your book. I mean, you could almost say Tolkien did that when he spent 20 years creating Middle-earth and that universe. But the payoff of his book was far better than most of us will ever get by spending that much time with it. But as far as that goes, I'm actually really looking forward to being able to get back into the forge and pound metal. Been watching a lot of videos on it. And I've been watching a lot of Justin Rhodes and This Wyoming Life. One of the things that my wife and I are both in agreement on is that we are going to step up and learn from our board of garden yet last year and actually try and get some of the skills and the things in place to run a successful garden this year, which will A, help once I get my either homestead or ranch, and B, help provide for our food. My wife and daughter have gone on keto. I should, but I haven't, just due to other circumstances. And it's hard to eat cheap on keto. You can't just run down to McDonald's and get off the value meal. You know? And one of the most expensive things on keto is actually not the meats and the fats. It's the greens, the vegetative. Because you go out there and produce is expensive because the way we grow it, most of it has to be shipped across far distances, including from like South America or Mexico. And so not only do you have to account for all that shipping cost, but they also have to account for, what produce ships well. And it's not always the produce that tastes the best. So by growing locally, we can grow a ton of lettuce, we can grow a ton of cabbage, we can grow a ton of the things that we would usually be paying a lot of money for. And we can get varieties that you just won't find in the stores because they don't ship, they don't store as well. So that's what we're doing there. My wife and I have already bought some seeds, bought some plants, and we're going to figure out what we want to do more in the future for this growing season, and potentially even what we might like to do for future growing seasons if we're still at where we are. And even if we're not, just to have a good idea of what we'd like to grow, what does grow well here, etc. Watching Our Wyoming Life, it's really been interesting to watch their struggle with their particular model as far as making ends meet. It is a highly competitive. They run a cow-calf, which is basically they have a herd of cows, a small section of bulls, and what they do is they obviously impregnate the bulls, create calves. If you don't know how that works, go talk to your mother. And then they sell the calves once they're weaned off their mothers. And they go off to whoever buys them. Oftentimes they go off to feedlots, etc., to be finished out and then sold. Well, that market is a highly competitive market. And so any losses, seriously affect the bottom line. Anything that goes wrong affects the bottom line, and it's a very tight margins game, playing it the traditional way that he does it. And so I'm learning a lot from that, and it's causing me to rethink certain things. One, I never planned on being in a cow-calf operation. My plan, everything going right, me getting the ranch I want, is actually, when a cow leaves my property, it's to the slaughterhouse. And a carefully selected slaughterhouse at that. 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised, pasture everything. Obviously, you have to feed during the winter sometimes, but ideally, I'll be growing my own hay. That is definitely one thing. Right now, where I can't even have a chicken, let alone a cow. But thanks to Our Wyoming Life and a few other channels I've been watching, I'm starting to learn, okay, I might not be able to get practical experience, but what can I learn from this? And I'm learning a lot, actually. Probably a lot more than I actually consciously realize I'm learning. But, I am learning, how competitive of a market that is. And, I am sure to a large extent that's going to transfer over into the type of operation I want to run. And so I'm also looking at other products, not so much like poultry, though you can make good money. It's not Justin Rhodes, it is Darby Simpson, who actually runs very successful poultry, pasture-raised poultry systems. Joe Salatin, and his name just escaped me, which is embarrassing because he's another Marine Corps vet, actually do very well with pigs. And so I'm thinking about including those into my systems as well. And Darby Simpson raises pigs as well. But, I am actively learning. I'm actively starting to look at property and stuff, even though I'm not in a position to buy, as Jack Spirko says. Especially in today's online world, shopping is free. So, start looking around at what's there, what's available, what the regulations are. I'm kind of at a stuck, because part of me wants to stay in Utah County just because of, that's currently where my wife works, that's where my day job is. And we have a lot of family here in Utah County. But as I'm looking into it, Utah County is a growing county run from a city. And the people who are making the decisions for most of the county, most of them have little to no agricultural background. Their viewpoint is all that of the city, which they want to grow because that increases their tax base in several different ways. So, part of me is thinking, I need to start looking outside of Utah County, but how do I balance that with, okay, well, right now I have a 5-minute commute to work. Actually, probably closer to a 7 to 10, but a very fast commute. I don't even leave city limits. And my wife works with traffic probably about 30 minutes away. So the gas savings alone, the time savings alone, are significant. Now, I don't particularly mind a long commute, but especially when you're driving an F-250, the gas bill adds up. So, starting to look at that, starting to figure out what is our exit strategy, how are we going to move towards this, because honestly, if one of the things that this has really taught me, this COVID-19 thing, is that that quote from Men in Black was dead on. A person is smart, people are stupid. And seeing a lot of the stupidity going on right now, a lot of the overreaction, is, making me not want to be around people. Not to mention the fact that as my home city is growing where I currently live, more and more we're getting that city mindset where regulations and fees and everything else is just nuts. And in Provo, where Matt lives, he can't even put up a shed without forking out almost $1,000 in fees and permits for a shed. Something that would probably cost him $200 to $300 for the shed himself. He's going to have to spend almost $1,000 in fees and permits, including getting the inspector out there to look at his shed. That's just ridiculous. And apparently, because he found this out when he went shed shopping, Provo City has been taking to flying drones and looking at people's property, and any building that wasn't there before, they send the inspectors out, and if it is a new one, with no recourse, they condemn it, and it has to be torn down by the expense of the owner. Now, arguments can be made that in a city, regulations and like that are necessary, and codes and stuff like that are necessary. But that's not how I want to live. I am looking to increase my own personal freedom, not move or have the place I live in be converted to a place that reduces it, especially like that. I mean, come on. So, I'm being forced to look more and further afield. But we'll see what happens. I'm not in a position to move on property just yet. But I'm also looking into different ways to get to the point where I can. Anyways, that's my update. I'm currently at 23 minutes. Before I get any longer, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. So, once again, work on your dreams any way you can, preferably actually working towards them, by doing, but if you can't, by learning and planning. All right, Finn Dyson out.